Hello everyone, a really warm welcome to this next series of our Westminster Business School Debates. Really pleased to welcome you to this debate on should I aspire to be a good leader or a good manager, with our academic colleagues from Westminster Business School. I'm Victoria, I'll be here throughout the session. I work in the international team, so if you have any questions during the session, please do feel free to pop them in the chat box and I will be answering them throughout the session. So welcome to Westminster Business School. Westminster Business School is located in the very heart of London. We have been teaching in London for over 180 years, and we have a diverse cohort of almost 20,000 students from around the world at the university. The business school, we have approximately 6,000 students and 350 staff. And of our postgraduate cohort, approximately 50% are international. So we're really proud to be a very diverse and welcoming community for you. So moving on. First, I'll run you through how you can apply to study at University of Westminster before I hand over to my academic colleagues. So this is how you can make your application. You can go online to our website, which is westminster.ac.uk. And if you look for the red apply button in the top right-hand corner of the webpage, that's where you'll be able to make an online direct application to study with us. Once you are at the website, you can do a search for your course in the course pages and check the entry requirements there. When you complete your application with us, the documents you need to provide are on your screens at the moment. So that will be your education history, which is your mark sheets, your certificate, your transcripts, your personal statement or your statement of purpose telling us about yourself and why you want to study this course at Westminster, 2 letters of recommendation, your English language test, so that's normally an IELTS test or maybe a TOEFL or a Pearson's or Password, your curriculum vitae if you have some work experience. And then for some courses, there might be an interview. That would be via telephone or Skype or Zoom if you're overseas. And then hopefully at that point, you would receive an offer that would be either conditional or unconditional, depending on your documents that you've submitted. In terms of the fees, so you can see the overseas tuition fees on the course page for the course that you'll be studying with us. These range from £13,000 up to £19,000. And you can also have a look at westminster.ac.uk/fees. So I will now hand over to Dr. Karen Jackson, who is moderating the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. So welcome everyone. My name is Karen Jackson. I'm the Director of International Development at Westminster Business School. It's great to see so many people here today. I realise that we have quite a mixture of people. So my first request would be, I see we've got some staff that have joined us. If you could introduce yourself to the audience. And also, I think we probably have some students who are thinking to come and study with us in September. Please also take the opportunity to let us know where you're joining from today and if you have an idea of what you're planning to study. Now, we've also, to start the session off today, we've put an audience poll up. Please do just take a minute to respond so that we get an idea about what your views are before we go into our first speaker. So while you are filling in the poll, let me just explain how these debates work. These are part of a series where we pose a question to our panelists, and our panelists come from academic colleagues in the business school. And today's topic for discussion is, should you aspire to be a leader or a manager, or perhaps both? So maybe you have a very clear idea, perhaps we'll change your mind today. Let's see. And what we do usually is we spend half the time allowing our panelists to actually just outline the key ideas in response to the question. And then the second half of what we talk about is what you shape through the questions you ask. So we open up the floor to questions from the audience. These can be about the topic for today, or they can be about any questions you might have about studying at Westminster as well. And so you shape this second half of the debate through posting questions in the Q&A box. If there's any small, easy questions that we can answer as we go along, Vicky, who you've just met, will be able to respond, but otherwise we'll save them up for the second half of the session. So I will introduce the first of our speakers, which is Professor Richard Harding. He is an expert in organisational history. He was previously the Director of Management Development and Accreditation Centre at the University of Westminster, and he was also Head of Department of Leadership and Professional Development. So we very much look forward to hearing your take on the question for today, Richard, and I will let you also comment on the feedback from the poll we've just done as well. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Karen. Yes, my name is Richard Harding. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be part of this webinar today, and so thanks to everyone who allowed that to be possible. I spent most of my career talking to and quite importantly listening to leaders from all kinds of organisations and all kinds of levels. And I'm particularly interested in how leadership is constructed in the various organisations. Most of my research has been carried out with navies, which is very specific, I suppose, and is a highly technical and high intense operational environment to be in. But I wanted to talk today about something I've learned that I found very useful, that is applicable in all leadership situations, and I hope you find it interesting as well, and a bit of fun to deal with. It's based upon the work by Professor Keith Grint, most lately of Warwick Business School, and Keith Grint was interested in decisions and problems. And as a lot of leadership revolves around decisions, the type of decisions that had to be made, I found it a very useful device just for getting people to open up and talk about the type of leaders that they are, the type of leadership the organisation requires, and what's happening in reality, however they might feel they might be about that as leaders. So without further ado, if we could just get on and talk about what I hope will be three simple lines that will enable you to have quite a lot of fun talking to all sorts of people about what leadership is about. So we could move to the first line. These three lines, I think, provide a useful introduction to how people might think about leadership. If we take the x-axis, the horizontal axis at the bottom, we have the level or the amount of leader-follower engagement there has to be for a particular decision that's being made. And you go from the origin, where there's very low leader-follower engagement, through to extremely high leader-follower engagement. Now, if you look at the y-axis, this is about the time criticality of decisions that have to be made and decisions that are being made. Back at the origin, we have decisions that have to be made immediately. If they're not made immediately, it could have negative impacts upon the organisation. And as it goes up, they become more and more distant, the type of decisions that have to be made. It doesn't mean they're less important. It means they're equal and often more important, because it means this is the trajectory, the direction of travel that the organisation is actually taking. So let's take a quick look at this. If I look at myself on this, maybe, or I'm talking to a leader about this, we'll be asking about what exactly do they do. And if they're down here in the bottom by the origin, they're finding themselves having to make decisions very quickly and not engaging the followers that they have got with them, because if they don't make the decisions instantly, problems are going to happen. The more time there is available, the more leaders can engage with followers in that process. And so in the middle, we have this thing called management at the moment, which I suppose is about due process. It's about the organizational health of the organization. It is the financial, the legal, the social, and the human resources elements of an organization, keeping it in fine health and fettle, so it can make the instant decisions when it needs to be, they need to be made. And that requires a discussion with specialists in the organization, specialists who are followers, and people who know on the ground what is happening the whole time. And as we move out further on, we're looking for a high engagement with the followers, because this is the trajectory the organization is taking. And this is where the individual is having to work with people to try and shape the way the followers themselves are seeing the organisation and its development. So there's a very simple way of talking to people about what their own experiences are. We'll come back to that in a second. You move on to the second diagram. Now, when Grint was looking at this back in 2005, he was able to identify 3 different types of problems that emerge from that. The command problems are critical problems. They speak for themselves in many ways. If we move to the management problems, these are what you might call puzzles. They have answers to them. They're tame problems, or they are problems that have answers and therefore could be called puzzles. But then you go up to the problems at the top, which are called wicked problems. And this has become pretty much a buzzword in most organizations now. These wicked problems that are rather different. And I think the interesting thing about them is that they require a different sort of activity on the part of the person who's nominally leading. So in both management and command, as the person who's leading, I largely have the answer. I know what needs to be done. I should be helping people implement what needs to be done. When it comes to leading those wicked problems, I then move into areas where I need far more collaboration with people, even to understand what they are. And let's just deconstruct that a little bit, have a think of what these wicked problems might be and why it's different from the other 2. If I move on to the next diagram. If we look at this, there are sort of ways of looking at it that show that they're all very important. How can I have an answer when there's a novel problem? And therefore, I need to engage people with what the problem actually is. If they're novel, I may not have any definition of success at that time. And I need to work with people to understand what that definition of success actually might be. And they're not necessarily the people that I formally lead. There are other people who are influencers within the organization. They may be even outside the organization as well. And because they're novel, we have no idea of how they're going to return out. Well, they may actually be insoluble, which is interesting in itself. How do I deal with something that is an insoluble problem? And when I start discussing them with people, I may find that one solution generates other problems. And that's likely to happen because not everybody sees a problem in the same way. And the fact that I'm engaging with other people deliberately means that I'm looking for the way other people see their problems. And so, well, I have no right or wrong solutions, but just better or worse approaches to developments. And that's because each stakeholder might have a different approach to an understanding of that problem. And that leads to another interesting point. As I work with people, as the leader works with people, we begin to define and construct the problem, and we then construct the solution together. There's no right answer. And in fact, not having a right answer because it isn't instant, it isn't an immediate critical problem. It's more important to probably get collective consent in terms of the direction we're actually traveling in. So the level of engagement, the time and energy that I need to put into dealing with these wicked problems is quite intensive. And that does tend to suggest then that leadership cannot be an authoritarian process. It's a collaborative process for the solutions. And I think ultimately the interesting thing is that leadership role, if that is how we're going to define leadership in that sense, is we are asking the questions, not providing the answers. A leader might become the expert in asking the question, not providing the answer. So given that's how the theory might be, how does that sit in practice when you start talking to leaders in the real world? If you move on a little bit to that. If you think of your own situation, or if you've been in an organization, if you sat in your office and your own manager came in or leader came in and asked you what have you been doing all day, and you say, well, I've been doing a great deal, I've been asking questions, they sometimes could think that's not exactly what they employed you to do. Because in many cases, I have key performance indicators, I have things that have to be done, and they're about managing the process. And to ask a leader, what am I doing? Am I managing the process? And is it important that I manage the process? Is that what's valued in my work? Or is it asking the questions that's important? And it can be both. At different times, the answer is different. And I've been working with a lot of managers who said that they're up and down this line, that 45-degree line, like a yo-yo. But as the organization changes, as the new events hit the world changes, they suddenly move from asking questions to a command mode where something has to be done. And I've had some interesting people who said, well, at one stage I'm employed to be a manager because I have certain key performance indicators. On another stage, I find something that has suddenly happened and I move into critical mode. And I even go off the end of the diagram at the end. I have to stop being a leader and do the job myself because there just isn't any time to try and get people to engage any further in it. So just 3 simple lines on a bit of paper can lead you to all kinds of discussions with people and to lead you to think about your own leadership style as well. And from that, we get some idea of what it is to be a leader in the modern world. And in all of these, there are certain things that emerge. And if we can move on to the last slide. To be a leader in this environment requires a number of things. And if you are thinking of coming to a university and studying leadership particularly, there are certain things that you'll be asked to explore. And all of these are relevant to what it is to be a leader in the modern world today. There are certain philosophical skills, analytical skills that you're going to require. And so you do, as a manager stroke leader, you need to analyze, you need to sympathize, you need to have empathy with the people that you're working with. If you're going to get the best out of them and to get them to open up to you and to become part of solution solving those wicked problems, that's going to be important. You're going to need artistic skills. You're going to have to be able to present and construct information. If you're going to lead a situation, other people have got to understand it. People only follow insofar as they understand what you're trying to do, and therefore constructing and presenting becomes an important part of the whole leadership process. And then not to forget performance skills as well. You've got to have different performance skills for different types of situations. As you move into different situations, people expect different things from you. The kind of action you take, the kind of audience you've got, the kind of props you've got are even worth thinking about. How does it work in terms of performance skills? You can have the greatest analysis in the world, but if you can't convince an audience by performance, then it's not going to work and you're not going to be able to lead that way forward. And perhaps the most it's like troubling to people, the most difficult is as you're leading people and you're asking for different perspectives, you want different perspectives, need different perspectives on things. You're going to have to work on how do I manage conflict? How do I deal with conflict? And how do you as an individual, the manager as an individual, solve the problem of conflict within making a decision? Decisions always involve some people being pleased, other people's not being pleased. And consequently, managing that conflict is an important part of the leadership process. So I hope you found this just an interesting three lines on a bit of paper that enables you to either begin your own journey as a manager or a leader, or just a way of talking to other leaders and managers about themselves and how they sustain their performance. As I say, it's something I found very useful, and I hope you found it useful as well. So if I hand over to Karen again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Very interesting. So just to summarize then what people were feeling at the beginning of this session, it seems like there was much less enthusiasm for being a manager. There was about half of the audience felt that they in fact wanted to be a leader and a manager, and then about 35% felt they wanted to be considered to be a leader. So can I just encourage everybody to post your questions, which we will address in the second half of this debate, on the Q&A box, which is available. And I will collect all these together and I will do my best to make sure that the panelists answer your questions. So don't forget to post your questions in the Q&A box. We also have another poll for you. So apart from this question over whether you see yourself or wish to see yourself as a leader or a manager, we also would like to know which of the qualities do you value most in a leader. So these might be things that you have experienced yourself, or you imagine that you would like best in a person that would lead you. Do you prefer them to be decisive and dynamic, technically skilled and qualified, honest and transparent, empathetic and compassionate, or excellence orientated? Which is the most, you can only make one choice, which is the most important one to you? So our next speaker for today is Dr. Rebecca Wan. She has spent 20 years working in higher education across both China and the UK. She is the Programme Director for the MA/MSc in International Business and Management, which in fact is one of the largest postgraduate programmes in the university. And I noticed today we have some people who were planning to come and study International Business and Management with us in September. And she's also the Director of Teaching, Learning and Quality in the School of Organisations, Economy and Society. So Rebecca, the floor is yours. We look forward to hearing your take on the question for today.
Thank you, Karen. Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to join today's discussion about leadership and management. I'm going to start with a story, an inspiring story of a young lady called Pei San Yao. Miss Yao was one of the co-founders of Ugly Food, which is a social enterprise aims to reduce food waste. And over years, Ugly Food has managed to save more than 120 tons of blemished but perfectly edible food. When Miss Yao started Ugly Food, she was only a student at the Singapore University of Technology and Design. And as a team leader, she spearheaded school assemblies, talks, workshops, and she also mentored many other student projects. When we think about leaders, we immediately think about people at the right top in our public life. But actually, when we look around us, there are many everyday leaders like Miss Yao who use their actions to inspire other people and to change the world. You are a leader when you run a weekend basketball team, and you are a leader when you lead a small startup. So the question is, why should everyone aspire to become a leader and a good leader? To become a good leader, you have more opportunities to set up your team, to set up a high-performing team, which can achieve much more than any individual could. So you have broader and wider impact. Because to lead people is to influence people. And becoming a good leader, you can also support other people by creating collegiate and supportive work environment. So everyone feels they're supported, they're valued within the organization. To become a good leader, you need a lot of different skills: coaching, listening, mentoring, communication. But more importantly, it is to support other people to develop, to grow, to become successful. That is the beauty of becoming a good leader. So it is not about you, it's about other people. If more and more of us aspire to become a good leader, and if more and more of us not only recognize the leadership opportunities we have, but also feel confident, feel able to grasp these opportunities, our lives will be enriched. When we look at leadership and management, we can see some overlapping areas. Not every manager is a good leader. Not every leader has got managerial roles. But I would argue that nowadays organizations need more good managers and good leaders. When we talk about, or when we think about leadership, I think it is important to put it into context, because nowadays challenges are changing all the time. And there's so many unpredictable things, ambiguities. So it is important to review leadership within culture, within context. And the leaders are also humans. They have their own personalities, characteristics, and personal conditions. So I will try to avoid simplifying leadership or best practices, because some good practice work in one situation, in one culture, in one organization, but not necessarily in another. Recently, I have the privilege to have some conversations with a CEO and president of an international company in the United States. I asked him, what stories do your employees tell about your leadership? He mentioned 3 things: to listen and to observe, to forget the title, to attract and retain talented people to work for you by creating a kind of inclusive atmosphere so everyone feels safe, everyone feels valued. Now, based on my own experiences, I would also like to highlight some of the attributes of a good leader. When you choose to become a leader, you choose to take the responsibility. You also choose to give credit to your followers and to give away credit when you become successful. And a good leader is also a good learner. They listen, they observe with open mind, open heart, and open will. That is where they get their innovative ideas. And then they take actions to initiate these innovations within their organization and envisage what could be done for the people and for their companies. So, as Ms. Yao, it is not just about managing ugly food. And it is not just about finding a solution to food waste. It is about leading and leading people with your value, with your belief. And it is about making good for the communities and societies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. So I'm going to invite Richard and Vicky to join us. I know Vicky's been hard at work replying to some questions that have been coming through. So let's invite them back. So at this stage, I'll do a couple of things. So first of all, let me just summarize the results from the poll, which maybe will start to inform some of our discussion. So as I mentioned, I think there was much more favoritism towards the idea of being a leader, or at least a leader and a manager. So about half the audience thought they could see themselves as being a leader and a manager, or perhaps they already are. And then the rest, 35% thought that in fact they wanted to be a leader. And then the second poll that we've done, we asked the question about what people thought was more important in a leader, the attributes. And what we saw was that in fact the most important attributes to people was to be honest and transparent. So maybe that's something we can discuss in our in the Q&A session. The second most important was decisive and dynamic, followed closely by empathetic and compassionate. Yeah, so the least popular were technically skilled or excellence orientated. So perhaps just to kick off, we've got some really great questions from the audience. And I think a number of these questions from the audience touched on the idea that they would like to also in this part of the debate hear about your own personal experiences. So maybe you can give some particular examples from your different roles. I mean, both Rebecca and Richard have got extensive experience in leadership and management positions. So perhaps with that in mind, can I ask Richard first of all, and then I give the same question to Rebecca, which is how can we get the best out of our employees in your experience? So after all the experience you've had, what do you think are some of the most important lessons you can give people listening today that you have learned in terms of trying to get the best out of employees?
Well, thank you, Karen. I think we've already touched on, I think, probably the most important thing, that is that, and Rebecca mentioned it as well, is to recognize as a leader and with followers that in fact you're really working together and you're trying to get the best for the people who are involved in this. And the questionnaires also indicated it as well, that it's that honesty and transparency, which is not always an easy thing to do when you've got to be honest and transparent about bad news. It can be quite a difficult, it isn't all not nice things. It has to be honest and transparent, is to be honest and transparent about the reality of things. And to get the best out of people, I think, is indicated by this audience, that they want to be treated with honesty and transparency. And I think that's very, 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 very important. I was also very interested in that the lowest indicator on that, which was technically skilled. And yet how often are the, if you like, the promotion and appointment indicators based upon that technical skill, the one that is least valued by people who are going to be followers? So it's an interesting, and of course it differs very culturally as well. If we'd have, I'm glad it's a sort of an international audience, because we're getting a leavening of ideas and things. But if you look at specific national preferences, where the organizations are working within particular cultures and they're also working within particular parameters, you get different responses. But I think that what you've indicated there, and what the polls have indicated, is getting the best out of people means being honest with them and transparent with them, and trying to make sure that you're working in their interests and not simply as hands or something like that. So that works there, but it isn't just simply just being nice, as it were. The issue of conflict is one of the most difficult within the leadership environment to handle. And it'd be interesting to hear more ideas about that.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So over to you, Rebecca. What do you think?
Okay, to get the best out of the employees, the first thing is we need to trust them. So we trust our employees, for example, when they put forward ideas, new ideas. We trust them when they want to try something new. And then we give them the power, we give them the responsibility to try these new things. So the first word is to trust.
Great, great. So let me lead on from there then. So this is how we think that we can get the best out of our employees, and this tallies with the notion of trust and honesty. So your argument is, Rebecca, that it's going both ways, that, you know, somebody working for you wants you as a leader or a manager to be honest. You might need, as Richard says, to say difficult things, but they want it to be done honestly. And in return, of course, a leader or a manager wishes to trust their employees. So yeah, I think there was a very interesting question asked from a person in our audience leading on from this, which is whether we believe in the concept of good and bad leaders. So intrinsically, do we believe in the notion of a good or a bad leader? And if we believe in this notion, how do we differentiate between them? And the person asking the question really wanted to hear some specific examples. So you don't need to name people, but maybe, you know, you've had enough experience behind both of you where I'm sure you could give some examples, perhaps. Richard, do you want to start us off?
Yes, a very good question indeed. And not an easy question to answer. It sounds as though it should have a one-word answer, but it doesn't. I mean, particularly when you're talking about good leaders or bad leaders, you could measure it purely on the basis of performance, on what has happened. They could be the nicest person in the world, but in fact, if they haven't led the group of people to a successful conclusion for themselves, well, then are they a good leader? Maybe they're not. It can be looked at it in other ways as well. So you can have leaders who are bad in some circumstances can be good in others, because we all have different strengths. And it is important, I think, when looking at leaders, you're looking at the context within which they're operating, particularly as people grow into their roles and the role that they have got, they may have had a few years, the world has changed. They may have been a good leader at one point, and maybe they're not so good now because the world is changing. Things are requiring different things of them. So the answer is you probably can find good and bad leaders, but good and bad is an idea, a notion that's relative at a particular point. You can go into a moral dimension of that if you wanted to. And that's another very big vexed question to try to answer in just a few seconds. But certainly that's the case, that you see good and bad leaders in particular situations. Some people are good in some situations, other people are not so good. And I think it's, again, for part of the fascinating aspects of studying leadership is you see all kinds of these things taking place. So yeah, it's a good question, but one that will probably take an entire one-year course to answer.
Yes, I agree. And I think touching on what you said previously, I mean, it's interesting that we've got a very international audience. And of course, the perspective might be very different. And Rebecca, I think that neatly leads on to you, where you worked across both China and the UK. And maybe you can reflect upon that different experience when you answer the question, perhaps. Anyway.
I do think, you know, when we talk about the leadership, we need to contextualize leadership, different approach, different practices, and also the followers' cultural perceptions, their backgrounds, their individual characteristics will influence their judgment of a leader, will make the judgment of whether he or she is a good leader or a bad leader. So the cultural context is very, very important. However, my argument is that whether a leader is good or bad, it is important that whether this leader influence other people or impact the society in a responsible way, or to influence people in an ethical and effective way. So in difficult times, there are many difficult decisions need to be made by leaders. The bottom line is, are you making responsible decisions or not?
Yes.
So that's my answer.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I think actually I would like to, leading on from that, I'd like to turn back to Richard and ask him, because you've touched on a point here, which is about the notion of a leader influencing decisions. And you've made your position quite clear. And I think it'd be interesting because somebody in the audience actually suggested the same, that it's about influencing decisions. And this is in some sense a marker of a leader. Richard, could we have your thoughts and reflections on whether you believe that to be the case?
I think if you're going to be, well, if we take the words, or if we take the words as they stand, if I am not influencing something, am I actually leading anything at all, or am I just being part of a debate and that is going nowhere? So the element of influence, I think, is very important in leadership, and that's why leadership isn't just about the, as it were, the bureaucratic notion of a particular position. You can be a leader by having, as it were, a cultural influence. You can be a leader by having professional influence. You can be a leader by having moral influence as well. But the idea of the leader also is actually trying to expose and to explain a particular position, and therefore to have influence on something. It would be, you may not be able to control it, and that's the difference between command. In command, you can make something happen. With a leader, you may be influencing bigger decisions the whole time, being part of a process that is bringing about organizational change. And that isn't simply by the position you're in, it's by the whole, can be the whole moral and cultural position you're taking in a particular organization. So I think the importance of influence is another very good question, and how influential you can be. And of course, with almost all leaders, we talk about, oh, you've got to manage up and manage down and things like that. It's the same with leaders. They have to lead up and they have to lead down. That doesn't mean they're leading the people who are nominally, bureaucratically in charge of them. But what they're doing is they're presenting a particular position on the organization or the work that's being done, and they're influencing in that particular direction. So it's not all about command control or managing particular systems. It is this role that you have in explaining and in presenting and looking at alternatives and helping people who are with you, around you, be part of that process as well.
Thanks, Richard. So I think I've got so many questions for you both. I'm going to have to alternate a bit here. So Rebecca, I think a nice easy one, but let's see, maybe not. One of our audience members asked, is it possible to be a good person but a bad leader?
Very interesting. I have heard some arguments recently. It is about our societies, our organizations do not need managers, do not need leaders, but we need good managers and good leaders. So being a good person doesn't necessarily mean that they are already a good leader, because being a good leader do need a lot of practice. A lot of practice, not just in skills, but also in your mentality, because there will be a lot of hard points, hard decisions, difficult times you need to deal with. You need to support other people to get over. So this is why we said we need more good ones, because sometimes the decisions could be difficult and could be unethical if the decisions is not good for the organization or the society.
Yes, thank you. And so this next question, Richard, leads neatly on from that, actually, this concept of good and bad leaders. And somebody asked, well, they actually asked it in conjunction with the concept of a manager, but let's apply it to a manager or a leader, and suggest that the manager or leader isn't performing. What should be done, and should it be different depending on whether they're in one of, they're operating in different functions? Should they be replaced or reformed is the question, really. I
think that's a tremendous question in terms of, and a live question in terms of how organisations perform. And it's at the heart of a great deal of like the professional development world that exists. If you've got someone who's been promoted into a position, take for example our poll, which said I'm a technically highly skilled person, and I've been promoted into a management and a leadership role. And I've taken those technical skills with me, but I don't have the managerial or the leadership skills to carry it forward. Then what should be done with me, as it were? Am I doing what the organisation expects me to do? Probably not, because we defined it as being bad. That's where we started from. What happens next is the most important thing, and it's the question, and it's the unanswered question at the moment, and remains unanswered, is can you develop good leaders? Can you make people good leaders who aren't good leaders? Or are these people somehow intuitively good leaders? And that's the big question. So the answer to the question, I suppose, is not a right or wrong, or yes or no. It lies very much in the culture of the organisation concerned as to how they view their leaders and how they view their managers. If they're highly performance orientated, as in some industries are, then you know the answer to the question. They're going to get rid of them regardless. If there's a famous saying in one industry that I was involved with that says, if at first you don't succeed, your successor will do better. It was as simple as that. It's just like change on a British proverb, but it simply means that there are no second chances in these organizations. But on another note, it might be that these people can be developed and should be developed. They may be performing now unsatisfactorily. That doesn't mean they cannot perform satisfactorily. And that a lot of I feel like the world is engaged in trying to get to that position where good managers and leaders become better. However you define good at the beginning, they're better than what they were before. And that really is what I would hope is where we go. But come back to what I said before, conflict is never far from where leadership is. And so you've got to expect to be dealing with some of these things. Yeah. Thanks, Richard.
So I think there's quite an interesting question coming from one of our members of staff that I might put to Rebecca now that kind of leads on. It's quite a specific question, but very interesting. How do you think that we can create an inclusive culture? So going back a bit to what you were discussing about the importance of culture, an inclusive culture, oh dear, sorry, everything has moved, an inclusive culture in a group that feels as if management are making more and more demands and giving little back. So if you're in a group where there's, lots and lots being asked of a group of staff that are being managed by somebody, and the argument is that you want to build this kind of inclusive culture, how can you kind of do that?
First of all, I think inclusive culture is not about delegating, putting more and more tasks on your team members. So that is a misconception of inclusive culture. Inclusive culture is a culture that everyone feels equal. They have equal opportunities to have their voice heard. They have equal opportunities to make contributions. They can challenge each other in a very safe environment. That is what I would understand about inclusive culture. And this is actually what we need in any time. Because early on, to follow up what Richard mentioned earlier on, which is also relevant to the current question. Now, being a leader, we do not focus on competition. What does that mean? You don't ask this question, or when you get out of your bed in the morning, I'm going to compete, I'm going to beat my competitors. But you focus your energy on improving yourself to do better. And that gives you the energy, and that gives one the passion to go out to work. And only with this kind of passion and enthusiasm that you can inspire other people. And I do think, passion and enthusiasm in one's role, in one's vision or mission can be passed onto your fellow colleagues, your team members. So this is how I understand why it is so important to have inclusive atmosphere, to pull everybody's wisdom together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca. And on a related strand, Richard, a very interesting question has come through asking about, as a leader, controlling your emotions. And maybe this is one where I don't know whether you dare to kind of give examples, but it can be a challenge to people in leadership positions. As you say, sometimes difficult conversations have to be had, etc. And so, the question was, how can we control our emotions to become a good leader? And I guess maybe I would add, when don't we want to be too controlling about our emotions because we are empathetic and so forth. So yeah, over to you.
Yeah, again, another very interesting question. I mean, and again, it goes to the heart of some of the issues about authentic leadership. And how authentic can I be in being a leader? How far do I have to put up a face or a particular facade that isn't me at all? Because it comes back to being these issues about attitude, morality, and all kinds of things. So it is very difficult. I think in terms of when you're managing a situation, controlling your emotions is easier because you're working within a structured framework. In other words, you're managing systems. But when you're trying to influence and you're not showing, if you like, you can't show enthusiasm, you can't show your preferences, it becomes very difficult then for an individual to be influenced and persuaded by your honesty and authenticity about things. And that does raise questions for leaders, where suddenly you may be put in a situation where you are told the organization is going in a particular direction. And your job as a manager is to take that forward. Can you also be a leader in that environment? Do you abdicate the leadership role? Does it go somewhere else? And so I think it's again a question that needs looking at, or should be looked at very, very seriously, in how leaders use their emotions. Some people use it, or I would consider illegitimately, in terms of, I can feign anger. And I've been in meetings where people have deliberately become incredibly angry over something, not because they are angry at all, but because they want to manage a situation and take a situation another way. So that's where honesty is lost again. And once honesty is lost, the leader in the environment goes out, maybe the manager succeeds, but the leader starts disappearing, and the leader is impoverished. So the level of emotion within the leadership role is something that's got to be handled very, very carefully, because it's a precious element that if people then distrust, then your ability to influence, which is really as a leader the only thing you've got. As a manager, you've got the executive power quite often. As a leader, it's often personal power. And if that trust is lost, then your ability as a leader disappears. So it's not, again, not a question that could be answered in 10 seconds. It's really a deep question that does need thinking about very carefully.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, thank you, Richard. And Rebecca, one for you. Someone's asking us, how can they be a strong leader? However you wish to define that.
How do I define?
Somebody in our audience is asking, how could they be, I guess, perceived, be actually a strong leader?
Okay.
You may want to define what you understand by strong leader first.
I think because there are so many definitions about leader, about leadership, and the best practices and approaches. Personally, I will stop giving another definition of a good leader or strong leader. But I would say, some of the attributes of a strong leader, in my view, start with dedication, the reliability, and also to lead by good examples, because your action speaks louder than your words. So a strong leader speaks by actions. And when we talk about actions, we mean ethical actions, responsible actions. The actions is based on how to develop your followers. And the actions is about how to enable the other people around you to perform naturally the best. That's what I will call a strong leader. If a leader can do that, he must be a very strong leader.
Thank you, Rebecca. So I have two kind of interlinked questions which have come up. So I think I might put, it's interesting actually, there was a kind of forum for managers, leaders, however you wish to call us in the university, where this topic came up recently. So I put it to Richard, this notion of identifying, finding a good leader, and whether there are any criteria. So the criteria, for example, we were talking about the holders of particular positions, and that maybe there could be a certain minimum types of experience that might be applicable. I wondered whether you have any views as to whether it is there's always criteria for a job, but how important is this notion of criteria? Or could you just take somebody, because you have a confidence in them, there's something in it when they offer an interview?
It's one of those questions, Karen, that's been around for at least 60 to 70 years. How do I get these good leaders? I probably know how to get good managers, because I know what the key performance criteria are, and I know if they know what they've got to do, then probably we can get a good mix of managers. But those good leaders are incredibly difficult to identify, because I could be a good leader one day and I might be a bad leader the next. And that's the real problem. And I've just got here where people have tried to list the criteria for being a good leader. And if you hold on to your hat, here's a few things you might want to think of to put on your list. Honesty, integrity, credibility, reliability, consistency, believability, vision, authenticity, motivating, competent, capable, humility, learning, gravitas, experience, organized. And that's just half of them. Insightful, reflective, long-sighted, multiple, foci, willing to take on situations, charismatic, and so on and so on and so on. So it's once you start trying to say there are certain criteria, first it'll be situation driven. What is the particular situation we're in? And you've got to remember also that a good leader today might not be that good leader tomorrow. And thirdly, you've got to have a position on whether you feel that people could be developed as leaders. There are some people that say, well, people are natural leaders. And others that say, no, leadership develops with the person in the job. And it's probably that we've got to take hold of, to say, there's something that an individual has that's appropriate to this role, to this institution at this time. And we're confident that we're willing to put the effort in to making sure they become better leaders and more confident leaders as they go on. Because otherwise, we can either have a leader that's instantly plateaued, they've been good in another organization, they've come to this organization, it hasn't worked, or we've got a leader who's good now that suddenly becomes a rogue leader, a bad leader, or one that doesn't perform. So it depends on your position to take on it. There's a lot of variables, but the key thing I think is, if you're going to appoint for a leadership role, then you've got to have an idea of how you develop those people as leaders, because the situation's not going to stay the same. And they're going, if they are leaders, if they are really decisive, people who want to become part of it, they will try and influence, they will try to be part of that process. And that gives you part of the debate, the discussion, and the dialogue that is going to make a good leader a better leader. But it's not going to happen bureaucratically, and it's not going to happen just from a job advert or anything like that.
Karen, should I just add one thing?
Of course.
Yes. Instead of going out and looking for good leaders, I think it is more crucial to create that kind of environment where leaders emerge, where leaders are developed.
I think very good point.
Organizations.
Yeah, very good point about, yes, it's often a discussion, isn't it, around whether we should in fact bring some, some fresh eyes into an organization, or whether in fact it's good to have already had this experience. And I guess I have one question of my own leading on from what both of you have just said, and I'd be interested to hear your take on it. I'm sure you have had this question, I've certainly had this question in an interview where you're asked, what would you do within the first 100 days? Based on what you've said, Richard, do you think that question itself is a valuable one? Anyway, I'll leave you to.
If that were an interview situation, you mean, if that question were asked?
I mean, is it a valuable one based on what you've said about perhaps it takes time to acclimatise to what you're in? I mean, is that a sensible thing for an organisation to have?
I would just say a very personal take on it. If that question were asked and someone responded by, I would be doing this, I would be doing that, the first thing I would think of is, well, this is an I person and not a team and leading a group person. So that's something to take on board from that. On the other hand, if someone was saying, well, the first thing I would need to do is talk to that group and to understand who they are, particularly if I was coming from outside the organisation. But the problem with that response is that's the one that doesn't necessarily get them the job, because the people who are on the panel want to hear about decisive things that are going to happen. And therefore, what they're going to be recruiting possibly is a very good manager, but not necessarily a very good leader. But then we often don't distinguish between management and leadership when we're appointing people. So that's just a personal view.
And I guess we haven't really talked about this so far. I put it to you, Rebecca. Do you think there is a natural kind of trend to start off maybe as a manager, but then develop into being a leader? I mean, is that a kind of natural transition, or do you think you can target being both from the outset of your career? I'm just thinking about lots of people who are listening, who are maybe thinking that they're going to come and study with us. What does that trajectory look like for people when they're thinking about becoming becoming a leader, do they naturally need to go up through the ranks and do a series of jobs before? Because it kind of goes back to the notion of having a criteria or a prerequisite for somebody to be a leader.
I don't think there should be a set pattern. That is, you become a manager first, and then you become a leader next. I think a leader can be born every day, because when a person tries to influence and try to take the responsibility and try to influence decisions or other people from anywhere, anytime, and you are on the way to become a leader already. This is why I emphasize this kind of everyday leaders. We start with small things. You start by leading a small team, by influencing a small group of people. So that is why I think leadership is very fluid. It is not fixed. There's no such things as a very fixed trend. And also, managers should aspire to become leaders. And these two concepts, they're complementary. They're not contradictory. Because sometimes we tend to think a manager must be or mustn't be a good leader, or a leader cannot be a manager. I think personally, I would disagree with this kind of concept. I think the two are interconnected, just like leaders and followers. Today, you can be a leader, and tomorrow you can be a follower in a different project. Whatever you are, a leader or follower, you're growing.
Okay.
I hope that makes sense to most participants here.
Can I add one other thing to that, which is exactly right what Rebecca said, is what we haven't looked at is what it takes to be a good follower. And should I aspire to be a good follower? And if we do look at that in detail, we'll often find that what it takes to be a good follower is also what it takes to be a good leader. They're the same things. So it's worth bearing that in mind.
Yeah.
And some people might be born with some desirable inherent personalities. But I would say environment, it is crucial to help people to practice, to develop, and to grow. And there's a lot of, personal experiences I have to share. I mean, not today, but maybe in the future.
Thank you. So I'm going to finish with maybe one last question, just to kind of close things to both Rebecca and Richard. And then I'm going to hand over to Vicky, because she has been very busily responding to some of the more detailed questions around the application process and so on. So I'd like to then give her an opportunity to kind of summarize a few of the things she's been responding to close today. But my question, my last one, is as follows. Maybe I give it to you, Rebecca, first, and then we can have Richard's take. In all the experience you've had over the 20 years working in your case, the UK and China, and what you've learned from being both a leader and a manager, what would be the one piece of advice you wish somebody had given you when you started out? So somebody listening today that wants to be maybe a manager and a leader, what's the bit of advice you wish you'd had when you started out your career that you could give people listening today?
Keep on learning. Learning by doing every day. I will say learn, learn, learn.
Thank you. That's a great message. And Richard, what's the final word from you?
I think that's an extremely good answer. I think the other thing that I would put in with that learning is I wish someone had worked with me or talked to me about developing confidence. That, I think, is one of the key things that undermines people's transition from good followers, managers, and leaders, is confidence. And often organisations are very unfriendly places because they don't want too much, too confident people doing too many things, and that can be quite damaging and dispiriting. So if it's learning and growing in confidence, those are the things that I wish had been there, and I certainly wish I'd understood much earlier in my career.
Thank you. I really thank you so much to Rebecca and Richard. A lot goes on before today and preparing for this. I'm really grateful. I'm sure the audience have enjoyed listening to the debate. I can only apologise to any of the audience who I didn't get to your questions. I tried my very best to kind of weave most of them into the discussion. I'm sure that Rebecca and Richard would be happy to hear from you by email after this event if you want to follow up with them. And I just leave it to Victoria to close for today.
Thank you, Karen. And thank you everyone for your questions. You did keep me very busy during the debate, so I hope I've answered all of your questions. If I haven't, please do feel free to reach out to us. You can either reply to your offer letter, or you can contact us on pgadmissions@westminster.ac.uk or southasia@westminster.ac.uk. To summarise, lots of queries coming in around two main themes, so I'll just quickly talk about those now. So the first one is scholarships. I'm really sorry, but the deadline for the postgraduate scholarship for September 2022 intake has now passed. So we're not accepting any more applications for that intake. If you wanted to apply for a future intake, so January 2023 or September 2023, then yes, you would still be able to apply for scholarships for those intakes. Please keep an eye on our website where you'll find all of the details. I'll just pop it into the chat box for you now. It's westminster.ac.uk/scholarships, and you'll be able to see the guidance and the deadline for those. The other point that was coming up quite a lot was CAS. So when will I get my CAS? How long does CAS take? What do I need for my CAS? I have popped in the link to the visas, but I will post it again for you now. So there's some information about the student visa that's in the chat box. If you're waiting for your CAS, please be aware that we have now started to issue CASs. We started approximately 1 week ago. So what you need to do to get your CAS is you need to make sure that your deposit has been paid to the university. That's a £4,000 deposit, and that you've met all of the conditions that are listed in your offer, so that your offer is unconditional. Once we receive your funds, we check your offer to make sure that you have met those conditions. We upload any documents that you've sent us, and we will then send you an email inviting you to request your CAS. That is a task that you complete in your applicant portal, where you check that all your details are correct. We might ask you to upload some documents, so that might be your financial documents, for example, which we will check for you to make sure that you are ready to apply for your visa. And then once you've completed that CAS task, we ask you to give us approximately 1 week, where our team will go through, check your details, check your documents, and they will then either issue your CAS or they will contact you with a request for any further information that we need from you. That's the CAS process. And I will just summarise again. If you haven't yet applied to the university, this is how you can do so. So you can go to our website, westminster.ac.uk, and search for the course that you wish to apply for. Once you're on the course page, you'll be able to check the entry requirements there. And if you look for this red apply button in the top right-hand corner, that's where you'll be able to make a direct application to study with us. To complete your online application, we ask you to provide your education history. So that would be your mark sheets, your transcripts, any certificates you've got, normally for high school as well as your first degree. Your personal statement or your statement of purpose, telling us about yourself, telling us why you want to study this course, why you want to study at University of Westminster. 2 references or letters of recommendation, ideally from your teachers. Proof of your English language ability, that's normally an IELTS test, but it could be a TOEFL or a Pearson's or a password test. You can check our website for details, or you can email us if you're not sure. Also, if you have work experience, we would encourage you to upload a copy of your CV when you make your application as well. The next stage would be interview for some courses. If you're overseas, that would normally be by Skype or Zoom or telephone. And then you would hopefully receive a conditional or an unconditional offer. If it's conditional, it will list what you need to achieve in your exams or in your course. And if it's unconditional, then congratulations, you would have nothing else to achieve academically. Once you have taken your exams and you've got your final documents, please do send them to us as soon as you can. Visa turnaround times are quite delayed at the moment, so you can be looking at 5 to 6 weeks in some countries. So obviously the earlier you start with the visa process, the sooner you'll be able to get your visa. In terms of fees, again, have a look at the course page. So the fees are between £13,000 and £19,000, depending on the course that you apply for. And you can also have a look at westminster.ac.uk/fees for information on how to pay your fees to the university. So moving on. We hope that you found the themes that we discussed today interesting. If you'd like to explore them further, if you'd like to apply for a course at Westminster, if you'd like to know more, these are the courses that we offer in the areas of management and leadership. So we have the MBA, we have International Business and Management, we have Management, Entrepreneurship, Innovation, Enterprise Development, Sustainability Management and Innovation, and the International Development Management. So do have a look at our website for more information about all of those. And I think that is it from us. So thank you so much for attending today. It was really great to have such an engaged audience. The questions were great, kept us busy, and it was really nice to hear your inputs into the debate as well. Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.